State, where are you with, which county? Kitzhaber County in Washington State, welcome. This goes beyond state lines for sure. And Coos County?
Douglas County.
Douglas County, oh, wonderful. Oh, Benton County, Josephine County, and of course, Kitzhaber County. Polk County, good. Okay, there's one fellow who, for some reason, didn't want to say he's here, but Jeff Grossman, he's the Congressional District 1 Vice Chair.
Yay!
Thanks for coming with us. All right. As many of you know, our Governor Kitzhaber has chosen to put himself in charge of the Oregon Department of Education and the Oregon Health Authority, and because of this takeover, he has created a circle of threat to our children. And there's three parts of that circle. One of them is school-based health centers. Another is the Adolescent Sexuality Conference in Seaside, an annual event. It's going to be first part of April this year. And the sexuality curriculum standards in the classroom. So you're going to hear about these this evening. Is our panel ready to begin? I will introduce them and they will start their presentation. Herb Gray. Herb is a Beaverton lawyer who has 33 years of general civil practice experience, including business organization, estate planning, probate, and assorted civil litigation. A substantial part of his practice involves litigation of civil rights and constitutional matters, including protection of traditional marriage and the religious rights of individuals, churches, and religious organizations. Herb has been an allied attorney affiliated with Alliance Defending Freedom. It was formerly Alliance Defense Fund for almost 20 years and is currently lead counsel defending the Sweet Cakes by Melissa Bakery against sexual orientation discrimination. These complaints were brought by the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industry Bullies. Herb is a volunteer in schools with College and Career Center, for school community engagement committees, and for the marching band. Good job. Lisa Maloney, on the end in the turquoise, is a Scappoose small business owner of Signature Window Treatments. She does a wonderful job. I have some of her treatments in my house. And is a mother of 4. As a parent, she has been active on committees which dealt with issues involving her children's school sex education curriculum. And Lisa is now a vocal school board member. She has worked with Parents' Rights in Education for over 5 years, and she also volunteers for School Community Engagement Committee. Lori Porter is a 4th-generation Oregonian. She was a public school teacher for 22 years and is co-founder of the grassroots organization Parents' Rights in Education. Thanks so much, Lori. She has gathered copious amounts of evidence which clearly reveal that the Oregon Department of Education, the ODE, believes that they know better than you what is best for your children, and they are the guardians of your children's health. This is particularly concerning for her, given Governor Kitzhaber's aggressive efforts to blur the lines between health care and education. Lori has uncovered numerous venues in which the ODE, the Oregon Department of Education, and other partnering agencies are advocating health care related resources and services to minors without parental knowledge or permission, intruding on the innocence of children and the rights of parents. This evening's panel will share practical ways that busy parents and guardians can successfully challenge the explicit sexuality education curriculum and undertakings that are being implemented in their child's school. This is where each of you can be successful in this challenge. This has and is being done. Lori has a master's in teaching and has recently earned her MBA at George Fox University. Lou Barnes will be doing the moderating of our panel and keeping us on task. Lou served in the United States Marine Corps from 1967 to 1973. He was a sergeant and as crew chief in gunner helicopters in Vietnam from 1968 through 1969. He was financial controller with Georgia Pacific in the Portland Division and International Operations. Following that, Lou was Zidell Company's Executive Vice President, Gulf Supply out of Houston, Texas, and simultaneously President, TFA Incorporated in Portland, and Vice President of Operation Tube Forgings of America, Portland. From 1988 to the present, he has founded Summit Manufacturing in Hillsboro. It's a metal fabrication company. Lou is married with 2 incredible grown children and 3 grandchildren. So you can see with that resume how he keeps us on task, Sergeant Lou. With that, Herb, Lori started. You guys mixed it up. Oh, sorry, Sarge.
Let's get on task, Eric.
Oh, darn it.
Thank you very much, Chris. First, again, I'd like to welcome all of you to this evening's event, and really appreciate your taking the time out this evening to all join us. And a special thanks to the North Coast Republican Women's Association for sponsoring this event. I'm kind of a latecomer to this. Most of my endeavors have obviously been business and in other areas, but several months ago, Chris invited me to a meeting of the Parents' Rights and Education Group in Portland. And all I knew about the gathering was that they were discussing, I'm using the term loosely here, problems with sex education curriculum that was being distributed throughout our schools and our school districts. Without exaggerating this, within a half hour, I wasn't believing anything that I was hearing. And I mean that, I'm dead serious. And I actually knew 3 or 4 people in the room, or I think I would have got up and walked out, and I thought, these people have lost it. You know, this is absolutely not happening. The more I listened, I was able, I think, to give a little bit different perspective, not a different perspective, but a new perspective on how little I was even aware of what was going on out here, or excuse me, at the Oregon Department of Education or throughout a lot of the school districts in Oregon. What is being billed as sex education from the Oregon Department of Education is nothing more than pornography.
Right.
I think that Lori and her team have done such an excellent job on the research on this subject. They're very thorough, they're very dedicated, and they're very, very knowledgeable. I think that what I have gathered so far is there are a number of agendas that are being brought to bear on this issue. And I think the group is going to be able tonight to connect the dots for us so that we can see, or how shall I say, unweave the web, so to speak, so we can have a clearer picture of what it is that is actually going on and what it is that we can do to help stem this tide. There is going to be a question and answer period, I think, that Chris mentioned earlier at the conclusion of all 3 panelists. So if you would please hold your questions until then, it would be appreciated. And I will re-emphasize that you have some green sheets of paper on the desk that could be used for that function, i.e. making notes or questions that you have for the panel, and then we can get to that after it concludes. There are a couple of slides that will, I think, set the stage for what our discussion is going to be this evening. If we can hang on just one second here. We got to back up. We have to back up. We're not going to back up. Bad computer. Oregonians can push back on the circle of threat. And basically there, I had a little bit of trouble, you may or may not, with all of the acronyms, but I think once they get into the discussion, you will kind of see visibly, or excuse me, you will get a mental picture of what they're talking about. Obviously, it starts with the Oregon Department of Education and Governor Kitzhaber, who is the head rep. The K through 12 system, the previously mentioned the Adolescent Sexuality Conference, WISE, which I'm not really sure what the acronym stands for. I do know what to do. And the school-based healthcare centers. One thing that some of you, most of you actually live in this community, that I wanted to congratulate Chris and her team on was not allowing the school-based healthcare center to take its roots in Astoria, and for that I think there are three things that are going to be touched on in more detail this evening. The Oregon Department of Education thinks it knows what is best for your kids. I'm sure you all agree with that, right? No takers. Even the law says that parents know best. Local control is nothing without parent control. And speaking for myself, I think that last sentence is something that every one of us need to take home. It isn't the government's responsibility to raise our kids, it's our responsibility to raise our children. I have heard of this gentleman, and I know this panel is very well versed with him, but I'd like you to take a few minutes just to read what this gentleman has said. Comprehensive sex education is a sham and a joke. It is also more than just a little creepy. If an adult or any other context came up to your child and tried to strike up a conversation about self-pleasure or oral sex, you'd probably have words with him and then words with the police after I beat the hell out of him.
Amen. That's how I feel.
With that, I think I'll just try to recap this and we'll move on, so we've got a lot of material to cover. First, Lori is going to identify the problem for us and connect the dots as to who the players are in this equation. Herb, as an attorney and from a legal perspective, will give us all what our rights are as parents to allow us to, be able to deal with this issue a little bit better. Lisa, from the perspective of a parent and a school board member, is going to lay out a roadmap for us to help us navigate the school boards, the school systems, to gather information and to help confront this issue and bring it, put it back in its box where it belongs. So, in that we have a lot of material to cover, let's just move this along and give Lori a welcome round of applause, please.
So welcome. You're probably going to feel a bit overwhelmed, intimidated, maybe angry, depressed by the information that we're sharing, but I want you to know, after I get done, you're going to have some hope. Your legal rights, and then what you can do on the grassroots or ground floor level in your community. So who knows what's best for your kids? Of course, we know the answer to that. We want you to know that we're not against schools, we're not against teachers and busy administrators. We are for the rights of parents. And our group, Parents' Rights in Education, we recognize that this is an issue that goes past political, religious views, people's opinions about social issues, contraception, school-based health centers. The bottom line is, you get between me and my child, we're going to have some trouble. Okay? Okay. So, I want you to know that Oregon Department of Education is hiding behind the words health, wellness, and safety. Those sound like really benign, uncontroversial words, but you've got this, your antennas need to go up. When you go back to your county and you hear these words, health, wellness, and safety, you need to do a little more digging. Because sex education and health, the lines are blurring intentionally and with great speed, I might add. So as I go through this, you're going to see phrases such as best practice, age-appropriate, medically accurate, evidence-based. Now, even school boards will hear this and go, well, gosh, I'm not an expert. The teachers know what they're doing in the classroom. Let's just sign it and get on our merry way. You've got to, again, do some digging on what do they mean by age-appropriate? Who's defining that? So these are terms that don't just take it for face value. So what is best practice? We know that if you're a physician and you're doing surgery, there's a good way to do that. Or if you're building a plane, there's a good way to do that. But when you're talking about sex, which is laden with various diverse values, opinions, beliefs, cultural customs, we're talking about a different story here. So I'm going to show you a couple statements, and I want you to ask yourself, what would be the best way, basically best practice, the best way to discuss and bring these topics to the classroom? Expressing your sexuality. How should a teacher talk to a classroom about this? When the door shuts, what's the teacher going to tell the students? How is he or she going to deal with comments or questions? Healthy sexuality. Well, what is healthy sexuality? It depends on what you think. It depends on the sexual act or that you are practicing in. So how you define that is up to the eye of the beholder. Pleasure. Well, if you're in a mixed gender classroom and you're discussing pleasure, what boundaries is a conversation going to have? Are there going to be boundaries? I know as a teacher, the door shuts and your trust is on me. And it doesn't mean that the teacher's a bad teacher, but kids say things and kids respond in certain ways. And some teachers will take that as an opportunity to impose their values. Or what about dental dams or lubrication or condoms? How is that going to be discussed in a middle school or a high school classroom? Is it going to be role-playing? Is it going to be demonstrations? Is it going to be call your local clinic and find out where you can get this? Again, best practice, what does that mean? It means something different for everybody. So if it means everything, it means nothing. What is age appropriate for kindergartners? What does a 5 or 6-year-old need to know about sex? Okay? And again, the door closes, they're with their peers, you're at the mercy of what the teacher chooses to say or not say. What you have here are revisions to Oregon's comprehensive sex education laws. In 2009, legislature voted in comprehensive sex education. Now, comprehensive is just like age-appropriate best practice. What does that mean? Comprehensive. Everything? And so these revisions were done in 2012. The sexuality specialist from the Oregon Department of Education boasts that these are the most progressive in the nation and that they push the envelope. But again, these are best practice in the eyes of the Oregon Department of Education. These laws, these Oregon administrative rules, they interpret the law. This here is for K-3. These are just a snippet of what, there's more of them, but these are some examples. Diversity. So the door closes. What kind of conversations is the teacher going to have with your child about sex, marriage, orientation, and so on? How about the conversation about why do you act like a girl? Who influences you to make you act like a girl or a boy? Whose business is it? It's not the business of the teacher to be having that kind of conversation. This one, appropriate person in the community to dispense medications. Why would a first grader, a 7th grader need to know that? You go to your mom or dad. Okay, this ramps up as I go through the different grades. You'll see that there are more things that come into play as far as telling kids where they can get different services. Grades 4 and 5, identify sexual orientation. Well, you've got to understand, kids have to know what that means, so you have to do a lot of front loading and discussion and dialogue before they can really identify. Medically accurate information. What does that mean? Medically accurate information for this? Medically accurate information for relationships? It depends on who's defining that. Grades 6 through 8, again, demonstrate the ability to access community resources around sexual health. Well, what does that mean? How far are they going to go with sexual health? And pregnancy, does that mean abortion, contraception, adoption, whatever? And then you get to the mental emotional health concerns. You've got to understand with HIPAA laws, you may not ever know what kind of counsel your child is getting. More best practices for 6th through 8th. Demonstrate steps to using a condom. Mixed gender classrooms. Differentiate between these different sexual orientation, gender identity. There's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of presentation. There's activities. There's role playing that you want your child, your grandchild, your niece or nephew to be a part of that. Criteria for evaluating the health of a relationship. Who determines the criteria? It's back to define. Who gets to make that decision? High school. Now, you send your children to high school or to school to learn and then hopefully graduate and be successful students. Not little activists on the school's dime and on the school's time. But here you've got, this is sex education laws that the Oregon Department of Education has interpreted to include advocating and promoting respect and dignity, whatever that's going to mean. You've got to find out, what does that mean? How far is that going to go, that kind of conversation? Safe and civil environment. What does that mean? Okay. And so on. Now, this here is troubling, and I just want to say before I move on, these slides are, the content is disturbing, and if you have children in the audience, I would recommend you not have them here, which is ironic, because these are things that kids across the state, the Oregon Department of Education is encouraging this type of content to go out into schools. And understand, it's comprehensive K through 12. So this is one of the things Oregon Department of Education advocates is teens teaching teens. And this particular artwork, it was made by youth in an organization called Youth for the Education and Prevention of Sexual Assault. Youth teaching other youth about porn. And that's best practice. Yucks and Yums map. This is teen to teens, Cascade AIDS. So we all have spots on our bodies that we would like our lovers to pay more attention to. But we also have places we'd like them to stay the heck away. Use the diagram above to map out all of your personal yucks and yums. Best practice, medically accurate, age appropriate. How to get your groove on fluid free. Abstinence is the power that you have to do or not do something because it's healthy and right for you. No absolutes. Who gets to decide that? Does that reflect a diverse community in your school, your district? The Oregon Youth Sexual Health Plan. You can get this online. I highly recommend you look at this. If you want to see why Oregon is where it is and where they want to take Oregon, this is a document to look at. This will explain school-based health centers, explain sex education, explain the CCOs, healthcare, and the seamless referral system between health, sex, the schools, and all that. This is touted as ideal plan across the country. It's brought in millions of dollars as a result to Oregon. Now, within that document, this is just one. There's many different things I could share with you, but one of the items in this document advocates that girls, minor girls, have access to emergency contraception, that they have access to hormonal birth control without gynecological exams. Medically accurate? Best practice. How so? And I want to pause here and say, if you have a school-based health center in your community and they do not distribute contraception, birth control, that should not put you at ease at all. By law, they are required to tell a student of any age where they can access reproductive services and how that's defined, abortion, etc. So you need to find out, we just don't sign a paper for your child to go to the school-based health center and think, well, they don't pass out contraception, so I'm safe. Now they're bringing in health care or mental health, emotional health, dental health, reproductive health, and all that. This documentary features the Oregon Youth Sexual Health Plan, highlights it. It also features the sexuality specialist at the Oregon Department of Education. And note on the cover, we're talking 2 girls on the left, a girl and a boy in the middle, and a boy on the side. And it doesn't crack me up, but put politics and ideology aside, and then we bump up to here, which is, the whole thing is ideological. And this is encouraged to be used in middle school and high schools across the state. Now, curriculum. Lisa's going to be talking about curriculum, and you need to find out what the curriculum is that is being used in your district. You need to know about the resources, the trainings that teachers and students go to, but you also, don't forget links. Because links, teachers and their material, they have links that they can go get information. Students are given links to reference, and these are just the tip of the iceberg. Planned Parenthood, take care down there. Threesome, I didn't spew. This is Scarlet Teen. Gaydar, sexual politics, go ask Alice. The list goes on and on. Sexual variety, is eating feces safe, etc. So, now that you're completely overwhelmed, please take heart. We do not want you to leave today with your shoulders down. That doesn't do anybody any good. We want you to be aware, be equipped, and know what you can do and say, enough is enough. So, take heart. There are things that you can do, and there are rights that you do have. Thank you. And I'll pass this on to her.
Well, Lori's job is to do the sensational and get you all interested. I'm going to be the voice of calm and reason that will put you at ease and help you understand that really it's not as bad as what you've just seen. If you paid attention closely to the language in some of Lori's slides, you noticed over and over and over again, community-based resources. How many times did you see the word parent or family in any of those slides? And I will tell you that the regulations that Lori was referring to actually go on for something like 80 pages. So if you want to really drill down on what happens in K through 3, it goes on for a while. And if you want to get to the high school stuff, it takes a longer while. So what you're seeing is just kind of a taste of what this is all about. But the idea here is that there are tools available, and I've done this presentation in front of a number of people, and what's really interesting to me is that most people don't really have a good sense of what the law really is. Now, I do it for a living, so I understand that I would know better, but what I'm going to share with you is a whole bunch of different ways where there are tools available to you that nobody's probably ever going to make you aware of, so you kind of have to make yourself aware. And basically, it starts with the United States Constitution, and specifically the 14th Amendment Due Process Clause, which is the basis for parental rights and has been for centuries in this country. Okay? And that is also reflected in the United States Code and the federal regulations. Now, what you need to understand is a lot of the stuff that Lori showed you at the end. Oregon Department of Education has their name all over it. Oregon Health Authority has their name all over it. It goes on. But guess where the money comes from? Washington, D.C. Title 10. And how many of you have heard of the Department of Health and Human Services? Okay. They're the ones that administer that money and give it away liberally. Can you think of anything else that they have been involved in recent times that maybe hasn't gone so well? The Unaffordable Care Act, correct? Okay. Same people. Okay. So we're talking health care for everybody. We're talking about health for students. You're starting to get the picture here of what's really going on. Okay. And then finally, if we look at Oregon law, there's some things that we can hang our hats on too, and I'm going to go through some of those things. So, I know you all probably read opinions of the United States Supreme Court. They're always short, they're always really interesting. Only in my line of work do you talk about submitting something that's 100 some odd pages and call it a brief. But for those of you who love to hate the United States Supreme Court, even a stopped clock is right twice a day. So I want to just give you a flavor of where parental rights really come from, and it starts with the decisions of the United States Supreme Court. Okay, now way back in 1925, it seems that there were some Catholic parents who wanted to send their kids to private schools in a little wayward, backward place called Oregon. And the state of Oregon said, wait a minute, you can't be doing that. And the United States Supreme Court said, the child is not the mere creature of the state. Okay? And they talk further about the liberty of parents and guardians to direct the upbringing of their children under their control. And I will tell you, this case from this little backward state called Oregon is the lead case in all the jurisprudence on parental rights. It started from here, okay? Now, for those that maybe weren't paying attention in 1925, the Supreme Court got to explain it to everybody again in 1944, this time in a case from Massachusetts. And again, you see the Supreme Court saying, it's cardinal with us that the custody, care, and nurture of children resides first in the parents. Who is primarily responsible for kids? Parents, okay? And part of that responsibility or that freedom that parents have is to prepare kids for obligations in our society that the state can neither supply nor hinder. Can the government teach your kids all the things that they really need to know to be good citizens?
No.
Probably not.
No, they're not.
Okay? Now, the thing is that if we think about those obligations, what are those kinds of obligations? Well, since people apparently weren't paying attention in 1925 or in 1944, we took another swing at it with the Amish in Wisconsin in 1972. And again, the Amish had the audacity to think that they ought to be able to educate their kids themselves instead of sending them to public school. And for the third time in less than 50 years, the Supreme Court talked about what the rights of parents are and what these obligations that parents are supposed to teach their kids are. Now pay attention to these words. Additional obligations includes the inculcation of moral standards, religious beliefs, and elements of good citizenship. Now keep those words in mind because you're going to see them over and over again. Okay? Now, in 1977, in a little different context, again the Supreme Court talked about the sanctity of the family. And they said that it's in the family that we inculcate and pass down many of our most cherished values, moral and cultural. Is anybody starting to get the drift that the Supreme Court thinks that parents may be important? Okay? Now, you don't hear about this stuff, but this is still good law. Okay? And then, for the really remedial students that kind of need a 2x4 alongside the head, in the year 2000, the United States Supreme Court quoted from that case from Oregon in 1925 and said, we've rejected any notion the child is a mere creature of the state. Okay, that's quoting directly out of that decision 75 years before. And that parents have the right, coupled with the high duty, to recognize and prepare their children for additional obligations. So you see what goes with this is freedom and obligation. And all of that rests with the parents. Everybody on board with this?
Yes.
Okay. Over 75 years, the Supreme Court has stayed with the same line. Okay? Now again, you're not going to hear that in a lot of places, but this is good law. Now, this also is reflected in federal statutes, and I've just pulled out a couple of them here. The FERPA Act protects the privacy of family records and information. Now, why is that important? Well, part of the components of a lot of the things that Lori shared with you is having kids do surveys. And you got to see some of those surveys. So what goes on at home? Ever see any domestic violence at home? Are there guns in the house? Are you starting to get the drift of what I'm talking about? Now, mind you, they're supposed to tell you in advance that they're going to do that. That doesn't always happen. So, just envision your kids going to school. Oh, here's a survey. No, we didn't tell your parents. Now, please fill it out. How many of you want the school collecting information on your family without your knowledge? Show of hands. Okay, maybe you didn't hear me. Perhaps I should put the question. And again, the Protection of Pupil Rights Act says any instructional material used in the classroom, parents get to see. Any instructional materials used in schools, parents get to see. Now, what happens if you go to the average teacher or perhaps the principal of a school and say, I'd like to see the materials you're using in health class? Well, it goes something like this. Well, we have a summary of it. No, I asked for the materials. Well, we've only got one copy and the teacher needs it. I'd like to see it. Well, we really can't take that away from the teacher. I'd like to see it. Well, you know, you're the only one complaining. I'd like to see it. Getting the drift of how this goes? Okay. Now, the only thing you have backing you up is federal law, and I'll show you in a minute, state law. Okay? All the teacher or the principal has backing them up is obstinance. Okay? Now let's talk a little bit about what Oregon law says on these subjects. Well, the first statute that you see up there is one of my favorites because this talks about all the stuff that's supposed to get, top priority in classrooms. Honesty, morality, courtesy, obedience to law, respect for the national flag, the Constitution of the United States. Oh, wait a minute. Respect for parents in the home. Now, how does some of the stuff that Lori shared with you reflect respect for parents in the home? I dare say if you went up to the average school teacher or the average administrator, or even, with all due respect to Lisa, the average school board member, and say, so how do you teach respect for parents in the home in your school district? They're going to go, huh?
Show me the material.
Say, well, it's in the education code. And they're going to go, huh? The second statute there is really an important one for you to have in your hip pocket because just like the federal statute, the Protection of Pupil Rights Act, this says a couple of key things. Parents have the right to be notified in advance that a course is going to be taught. Not after it happens, not the first day that they're teaching it, in advance. Okay? And since we're all intelligent people, we can read on and see that any parent or guardian may inspect the instructional material to be used before or during the time the course is taught. Okay? And then if you look at all this stuff and you decide you don't want your kid exposed to it, you can ask to have your kid excused. Now, is any of that ambiguous? You all get what that means? You get to see it beforehand. You get to see it during. And if you don't like it, you get to say your kid's not participating. Okay? So, armed with all this law, we don't have any problems, do we? Well, let me just say, and I don't think this is much of a secret, especially after you heard from Lori, we may be leaking oil a little bit on some of these things. And there's a couple of trends I think you need to understand are going on. One is, back in the day, we all kind of, whether we went to church or not, we all pretty much believed in Judeo-Christian values, and those were pretty well recognized, and they were seen as fixed standards, right? Well, we've gotten better over time. Now it doesn't matter what you believe, because all points of view are entitled to equal deference and respect. So the idea that there is truth or any sort of timeless standard is kind of taking a beating nowadays. The 14th Amendment that I talked about and all those Supreme Court cases I showed you, part of the reason I went through all those in excruciating detail is so that you can see that even though that law is out there, what has happened is that the Congress and also the Oregon State Legislature has said, well, we need to kind of pass laws that say it's okay for parents to be involved in this process. Now, for all of you who've had civics or a government class, what's the highest source of authority that can be enacted by a government? A constitution. What's next? A statute. Why are we passing statutes to say the same thing that the Constitution already says? Okay? And finally, all of those cases and all of those statutes I just showed you, which are supported by regulations and so on, basically shore up the idea of parents having the primary control, right? Well, that doesn't work so well if the government has a different idea about how kids ought to be raised and taught. So, because of that, what we have is an increasing emphasis on what I call government mandates. Can you think of anything else going on in our society right now that involves government mandates?
Democrat care.
Okay. So the idea is, even though we have law on the books, the government itself is saying, that doesn't matter, and we know better. Okay? So it's not, what we're talking about here again, it's not the average school teacher that's the boogeyman. It's not the average principal. What it is a whole bunch of government officials way up the food chain who have helpful friends whispering in their ear, and Lori pointed out some of them, to say, now it's time for us to take control of the kids. So, armed with all of this, you may be saying, what in the heck can I do?
Yeah.
Well, there's actually a lot you can do. First of all, if you happen to have a few of these statutes in your hip pocket, you can have a very interesting conversation with somebody that doesn't want to share this information with you when you ask. And, you know, I make my living being kind of difficult. We call it advocacy, but it means we're getting in somebody's face and trying to interfere with what they want to do. But the idea is that you could actually go up to a principal or a teacher who's resisting you and say, you know, you really wouldn't want to deny me the chance to look at that stuff when federal and state law allows me to do it. Would you? And they go, huh? And you get to show them. Now, if you believe in the rule of law and you put law in front of them, what do you suppose they're going to do?
Nothing.
They either have to tell you to your face the law doesn't matter, which doesn't tend to play very well, or they have to do what you ask, right? You can opt your kid out, and there will be all kinds of objections to that. Well, it's really important. These are graduation requirements. You're the only ones who are complaining. All those kinds of things. It's like, well, So if state law says I can opt my kid out, then I should believe what you're telling me because, right? So should I believe you or should I believe what the statute book says?
Right.
Now, one of the things that there's all kinds of nuggets buried in the education code, and one of them talks about encouragement of family communication and involvement. So I would say to you that if they don't want to share information with you, you can always say, well, right down here in the education code, it says that the schools are supposed to insist on encouragement of family communication and involvement to help students learn to make responsible decisions and for abstinence to be emphasized. I just quoted you the statute. So again, your question to the school official would be, so if the state law requires that, why would you be telling me I can't? Okay? And what's really important too is that it's not just parents who have some rights here. If the teachers don't want to be involved in teaching this stuff, all they have to do is say, I'm not going to do it. Okay?
Wow.
So, in the face of all of this, what you need to understand is the conversation we're having tonight is taking place in more and more communities in this state. And some of you may be from communities where this is happening. In the Salem-Keizer School District, there's a program called the Teen Outreach Program, which involves classroom instruction by Planned Parenthood volunteers, not certified staff, teaching some of this stuff. How many of you are in favor of unlicensed people that you don't know being in a classroom instead of a teacher who's being paid? If there's volunteers in the classroom, what do you suppose the teacher's doing? The teacher's got to stay in the classroom, right? So the teacher is getting paid to do nothing. So how is that helping the educational process? That same program, as for those of you from the Portland area, you probably heard about a teacher that got fired because he didn't play ball. Planned Parenthood volunteers to teach the TOP program that I just referred to came to his classroom with the blessing of his school administration, and when he said, wait a minute, parents need to know this is going on, parents need to know what we're going to be teaching and everything, he lost his job over it, even though all the things that we've talked about are on the books. In a number of these other communities, school-based health centers have been beaten back. And I will just tell you, in the Salem-Keizer School District, the community has gotten fired up to the point where for over 2 years, groups of people have been coming to the school board meetings and standing up during the public comment time and saying, so when are you going to quit having Planned Parenthood teaching in the classroom? Now, Lisa, if somebody asked that question in your school board meeting, would that be kind of awkward? Yeah, for over 2 years, every month, that's been going on. Okay? So, the thing is that you have a lot more to work with than you may think. You may say, well, who am I? But sometimes asking the right question in polite company, out in front of everybody else, can really accomplish some great things.
Can I make a comment? I happened to go to the Keizer School Board when one of the candidates against Berkeley, actually, who has children in that school board, was called prior to him attending and told not to mention Common Core. And I was there when he asked for her resignation.
Well, Common Core is a different thing than what we're talking about.
Well,
that's a whole different. That's an evil thing all to itself. But
yeah.
If you want to talk about Common Core, then we can spend hours going through this stuff and then get to Common Core. But anyway,
that's the way they approach it.
That's the way they approach it. Yeah. So there are some materials over here on the table that includes this in more expanded form. But I'm going to share some things with you about how you deal with this. One is, a lot of people say, well, what difference does it make whether we have school choice? How many think that competition tends to change the game? Every kid in a public school comes with about $6,800 worth of state school support. If that kid doesn't go to a public school, where does the $6,800 go? Somewhere else. So, if you can vote with your feet, you can also take $6,800 in state school support with you. Okay? So even if you don't choose to do that, you want to maintain the right for people to be able to do that, because then they have to listen to you, right? Because they don't want you to leave with the $6,800. I'm also a big fan that you need to be involved in the schools. And you heard part of my bio is that I volunteer regularly in the schools. And I will tell you, in the school that I do most of my volunteering work, and in the school district where I live, most of the time, a lot of the stuff that you're hearing here doesn't take place because they don't tolerate it. Now, how long they can hold up remains to be seen. But part of the reason that I volunteer is so that if I need to talk to somebody about a problem I have, they know who the heck I am. So just think about it. If you're the average school official and somebody who's never been around, never contributed to the school shows up and says, you know, this is unacceptable and I'm not going to put up with it. Are you going to do okay with that? Or would it be better if you've been involved in the school, you've talked to the people, you know who these people are on a first-name basis, and then you show up and say, you know, I like you, but we got a problem, and I'd like to talk with you about it. You're probably going to be shown into their office and have a discussion. So I think it's valuable to be involved. I also can't be overemphasized enough being persistent. When they tell you they don't want to show you this stuff, you got to keep asking. Okay? And one of my favorites is, if they keep resisting, they say, you don't really want me to file a public records request, which goes to the school district, which then the school district lawyer has to look at, which means it costs money that comes out of the general fund, just to give me the stuff that I'm entitled to anyway. Do you? Okay? It's not hard to do a public records request, especially if it's something that federal and state law says you get to see. And the last thing I would say is, don't go in by yourself, because what they tell you is, oh, you're the only one complaining. Now, if you go in there with 4 of your friends who all have kids in the school, and you say, you know, we're not happy about something, can they say, well, you're the only one? And just like what's happening in Salem-Keizer School District, there's people showing up in numbers at every school board meeting every month for over 2 years. Can they tell those people they're the only ones complaining? No, because it's in the newspaper too that they keep showing up to the school board meetings. Okay? How many of you know what this is? This is a bureaucrat's worst nightmare. How do you drive a bureaucrat crazy? You take their time and you screw up what they want to work on. Okay? And this gets back to persistence. You throw sand in the gears. What you do is you say, no, what I'm asking is appropriate, and I think you ought to do it for me. And by the way, I'm going to keep asking until I get it. And if you don't give it to me today, put me on the calendar for the same time tomorrow. And if you don't give it to me tomorrow, you can put me on the calendar for the same time. Oh, and by the way, in between times, I'm talking to my friends who all have kids in the school, and they'll be asking too. Now think about what the average school official has. They got paperwork, they got meetings to go to, they got all kinds of stuff. Do they want to spend half of their waking hours dealing with you? Answer, no. You know, in the Bible it talks about the widow who kept coming back to the unrighteous judge, and she kept coming back and kept coming back and kept coming back. And for those of you who know the story, you know that the judge finally said, Okay, I'll give you what you want. Now get out of here. You want to be the widow going to the unrighteous judge and saying, I will keep coming back until you give me what I want. So, again, the money for all of this comes from Washington, D.C. It's being pushed vigorously by the Oregon Department of Education from Salem. And how many of you want schools run from Washington, D.C. or from Salem? So the key to this whole thing, if you believe in local controls over schools, you have to be in favor of parent control. And that's what this is about. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. And she, again, is going to try and be dramatic about a bunch of stuff.
I am a concerned parent that just had my antennas up and started paying attention to what was going on in my school. Yes, I am a school board member. However, I speak for myself today. I don't speak on behalf of a board or for anybody else other than myself. And what Herb said is right. Local control is nothing without parents. And as parents, community members, grandparents, we have every right to ask questions and to find out what's going on. And my daughter, when she was in 6th grade and I was at a conference, they said, the teacher was like, oh, we got to start teaching some new health thing. And I went, what are you talking about? What do you mean? What is it? She says, I don't know. But they're going to make us teach it. They said we have to. I said, well, who said you have to? Well, they did. And so they had this great new curriculum called Making a Difference, an abstinence approach to HIV and teen pregnancy prevention. Sounds all right, right? So 6th grade, you guys remember being in 6th grade?
No.
You guys, okay. I remember my 6th grade teacher. Now, we don't have any real 6th graders in here, right? Because that wouldn't be appropriate. Okay, so let's all pretend that you're in 6th grade. So take yourself back to 6th grade, because I want you to have a little lesson for making a difference. Remember we talked about age appropriate and what's okay for kids? Well, this curriculum is in many schools all over Oregon. It's called Making a Difference. It is used in 6th grade, sometimes 7th grade, but it starts out in 6th grade. So you guys are the participants, okay? You're 6th graders. I'm going to be the teacher. And it says, have the participants brainstorm answers to the following question. Okay, kids. Now, here's the question. With all the messages teens are receiving about sex, what are some of the ways people express their sexual feelings to themselves or other people? Answer? Come on, kids! All the messages, you've heard them.
We played dodgeball.
Dodgeball? I know, but they're not teens yet, but it's okay, they're gonna be someday. Now come on, 6th graders. Okay, darn, they're not answering the question. What does it say? Oh, if participants are hesitant, I'll ask prompting questions. This is out verbatim from the curriculum. What kind of sex can people have by themselves, kids? Yeah, 6th grade. Kids! What other things might people do with their mouths? Oh, you can think of something, can't you, kids? What other things can people do with their hands?
Oh my God.
Now, one parent
Stick their finger in their thumb in their mouth.
in another school, he found the cheat sheet on the wall of all the answers that you were supposed to come up with, that you guys can come up with. But certainly 6th graders will be able to figure it out. And he lives in Kansas. This curriculum not only is in Oregon, it's across the country. They're using it because it's age appropriate and it meets the law. That's what I was told. We have to do it because it's the law. Okay, so kids, let's get to the answers now, okay? These are the answers that the teacher needs to solicit from the kids about how you express your sexual feelings with yourself and other people. Oral sex, caressing, dancing, masturbation, talking, hugging, grinding, sexual fantasy, children, this is wonderful. Anal sex, massage, holding hands, vaginal intercourse, touching each other's genitals, saying I like you, Okay, one more other quick lesson. Because we have to understand children, now remember you're in 6th grade, the definition of vaginal intercourse, oral sex, anal sex, and masturbation, because this is very important to your education. It's the law. Vaginal or sexual intercourse means, well, you can read it yourself. Oral sex means a person's mouth on another person's genitals. Anal sex, kids, means a man's penis in a person's anus, rectum, or behind. And kids, let's not forget, you need to know what masturbation is. It means rubbing, stroking, or playing with one's own genitals or the genitals of another person. Oh, you don't know what genitals are? Maybe you should ask your parents that one. And the reason I do this, I really don't talk this way, and I apologize because I think it's disgusting and appalling, but I want you to know that what we're talking about is real. And when Lou said he came and he was sitting there going, no. And when I've told other parents, do you know what's in this curriculum? And I've told them some of the stuff and they go, no way. They wouldn't do that. Not in my school. Certainly not in my school, that's not going to happen. And I hope it doesn't. And I think there's some wonderful teachers, and I know there are great teachers and administrators. And as Herb said in his school, there are those who say, it's not going to happen in my classroom. But there are other teachers who are given this curriculum and said, you need to go teach this. And the teachers think, I have to do this? Well, here I go. And they do it. And when I first heard about this curriculum, and I said, I want to see it, when it came out, the first thing I got was the summary. Oh, all the ways it talked about abstinence. Oh, I forgot to tell you what abstinence means in here. Abstinence, well, you guys right now, you're all abstinent. Okay, I can see it. It means avoiding or not engaging in vaginal, oral, or anal sex at the moment. That's what abstinence is, and that's what this curriculum it's a very thick book, goes on and on and on, and stresses to 6th graders. In my school, a parent told me just a few weeks ago when her kid was in 6th grade 2 years ago, she said there was a video, and she was asking for the video. She was looking at the material, and she asked to see the video. And she said, what's the video? To the teacher first. Teacher says, oh, well, it talks about things I don't want to talk about. It's really embarrassing. And the mom said, well, I want to see it. Oh, you have to talk to the principal. She went to the principal, and the principal said, oh, well, we don't have that right now. And she kept asking, and he finally said to her, I really don't think it's appropriate for you to see. But it's okay for your 6th grader. And you know what else she told me? She said, "What?" He said, well, we'll get to it. We can't find it right now, and summer's coming, and we'll get it to you. And she said, I really feel bad because she didn't persist. She didn't stick with it. And that oftentimes is what the hope is that you'll give up and you'll stop. And she should have had other parents with her. And that's the one thing I can stress, is to go in and ask. And in my district, I was on a committee for the curriculum. I heard, again, antennas went up. Somebody said, oh, there's a health committee coming up. Really? I'm going to be on that. Get on the committee. And it didn't go my way, a lot of it. And they adopted some curriculum that I didn't like. But those teachers are really careful with what they're doing. They're not... Eventually, my school, 5 years ago, they said no, they pulled this. And unfortunately, this past year, they did adopt that. It's in Scappoose. It's in St. Helens. That is one curriculum making a difference that is all over this state and even in Kansas. So What can I do? Herb told you our legal rights. Know your legal right. You have every right, whether you're a parent or you have kids in school or not. You are a taxpayer, and you can know what goes on in your school. In fact, in my school, the policies are that anyone at any time, any community member, can go in any class and visit. All you have to do is check in at the office and sign and get a visitor slip. And that's the same anywhere, I'm sure. Begin asking questions. You know somebody who's in school, right? Whether you have kids, grandkids, neighbors, friends, go ask to see health curriculum. In fact, they don't even call it sex ed anymore. When we were young, sex ed, they call it healthy sexuality. What does that mean? Well, it's all those wonderful things they said. Healthy sexuality. You want to see that curriculum. Ask to see it. Don't look at the summary. Look at the curriculum. And it's the curriculum that's the issue, not the teacher, not the principal necessarily. They've been given it oftentimes and said, here, you have to teach this. And they're just as dumbfounded, frankly, as a lot of them. My daughter, when she was in the 6th grade and they didn't pass this, and they kept just the health books we had and a few other pieces, and I told her teacher, I said, she can stay in the class as long as you're just doing the health books, because it was regular health, but not any of that other stuff. And she said to me, I'm not doing any of that other stuff. I said, good, then we're fine. So, and this year, my daughter, who was in high school, and they passed some of this curriculum, they still didn't know what it was. The teachers didn't know. They were trying to scurry to put it together, and I was asking to see it. And he was very nice, the teacher, and I kept my daughter out, and I said to him, teacher, I said, you are the last line of defense when that door closes. I hope you do the right thing. And he's a nice guy. I mean, he really is. And I think he was, but there are some teachers that maybe aren't as nice as him. But you know what we were told in our school district? Trust the teachers. Have you heard, every week in the news that teachers are sexually assaulting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mostly women teachers with teenage boys. Is pretty disgusting. But we should trust them. In fact, there was one, I just have to tell you, in Sherwood. Her husband was a resource officer, and she admitted to engaging in sexual misconduct with high schoolers. And do you think she was trusted, one of the most trusted teachers, if her husband was a resource officer? Probably. Anyway, what you can do is we have this, you guys each have one of these. You have, there's a website on the back of here. There are some great resources on there. And one of the things, a link on that web page is this Empowering Parents. And you can find that on the Parents' Rights in Education website. This is actually linked and put together by Focus on the Family, and this is wonderful. So that some of that stuff that Herb just said, advocate for your kids, advocate for your schools, support your school board members, get to know them, as Herb said, know who the teachers are, and remember, it's not the teacher that is the problem, it's the curriculum. And it's those people, many of them are essentially victims to what's happening. And they don't really know. They're just told, you have to do this. But do something. Please, when you leave here today, after everything you've heard, do something, have conversations with others, get together with somebody else and go to a school in your district and start asking, look, and go see the curriculum. See what your school is doing. And hopefully, you won't find making a difference, but you probably will. So do something. That was my last slide. So we appreciate you coming. And Lori, I have to tell you, we were introduced a few years ago haphazardly. She was a teacher, I was his parent, and found out this stuff. And she has put together all these pieces of what's happening, and it can be big and overwhelming. But in your district, we can't sometimes worry about everything and the Unaffordable Care Act, but we can do something right where we live. And that's what I encourage you to do. Go to the website and just ask questions in your district. So thank you guys. And Lou, I'm going back to you.
I've given an order, but it isn't going to pay attention to me. I'm challenged. Chris?
Oh, well, I'm going to start this out, but remember, Jeff?
Oh, it's just waiting for when you're taking questions.
Oh, we are going to have questions very, very soon. But I just wanted to put something in perspective about the money. Now, we've gone to some of the 990s for the organizations that are sponsoring or supporting the Adolescent Sexuality Conference and other things for the Oregon Department of Education. It's millions of dollars. And you can say, yes, it comes from Washington or it comes from Salem, but it's coming from you. And my goodness, millions of dollars are spent on the salaries for the people to do this to our children. And I just wanted to put it in perspective. I have a friend who teaches 5th grade at the Napa Grade School in Clatsop County. And she is working hard to ask friends and family to earn $2,500 so she can buy 5 iPads for her math students. And $2,500 so she can teach in the way we expect her to teach the curriculum that the children deserve and we want them to learn. And so while millions is being wasted on this disturbing curriculum and things that they're bringing into the schools, so there's a little comparison for you. So I think it'll probably take some efforts in Salem. Peggy, you can give your husband a hint on this. I don't know what that bill, if that's what it would be, would look like, but which would you rather see your money spent on? The school-based health centers, this curriculum, and the Adolescent Sexuality Conference, or education that we expect and the children deserve? I mean, it's a pretty easy. I think it would be the latter. So that's my perspective on the money spent. Keep that in mind. It's your money.
Thanks, Chris. Well, I think that I can safely say that you can't make stuff up like this. You probably have a real good perspective now of why these people have dedicated so much time and effort to this issue and have departed a great deal of information to all of us that I hope we can walk away with and do something with. The Oregon Department of Education thinks it knows what is best for our kids. Obviously, that's a negative. Even the law says parents know best. That's positive. And local control is nothing without parent control. And I'll just speak for myself on this issue. We all need to stay engaged. The only way we're going to accomplish any mission that we set our minds to is stay engaged, keep in the fight, and strengthen numbers. We've got a great group of people here this evening, a lot of people. You're going to go back to your various communities. You're going to hopefully communicate the information that was departed by this great panel we have here this evening, and just stay in the fight. As long as we do that, I think Herb and both Lisa pointed out, you get in somebody's face and stay there. And you never, ever, ever, ever quit. You still have these on the desk if you wouldn't mind. We're going to open it up for question and answers right now. And should you have I think Lori was looking for any examples that you would like to share with her and her group. They're going to be putting, or I think gathering the information up and hopefully presenting it in some other fashion so that everyone in the internet community can see it. With that, where's Mr. Bridges? Hey, Bob.